Gary Heidnik was an American killer and serial rapist who harbored a deep hatred for women. From late November 1986 to March 1987, over roughly 4 months, he abducted 6 women from the streets of Philadelphia. He held them captive in a pit he dug in the basement of his North Philadelphia home, where he repeatedly beat, tortured, and raped them. 4 women survived the ordeal: Josefina Rivera, Lisa Thomas, Jacqueline Askins, and Agnes Adams. 2 were murdered. Sandra Lindsay died February 7, 1987, from starvation, torture, and fever. Her body was later dismembered and parts ground up. Deborah Dudley was electrocuted to death on March 19, 1987, after Heidnik forced the women into a water-filled pit and ran electricity through it. Heidnik's cruelty went far beyond any movie monster. What those women endured was real, unrelenting horror straight from a living nightmare. Gary Michael Heidnik was born November 22, 1943, in Eastlake, Ohio, a suburb of Cleveland, to parents Michael and Ellen Heidnik. He had a younger brother, Terry. Terry later described their father as extremely violent toward the entire family. He regularly beat both sons and his wife. In a 1987 interview, Terry recalled the terror. "He got to the point where I'd be afraid to pick anything up because he'd beat us if we dropped something, like a glass. I was knocked unconscious once when I was 3 years old." After his parents split, the boys lived with their mother. But she struggled with alcohol, often leaving them alone and bringing home strangers. After 4 years, they moved back in with their father and stepmother. It was like going from the frying pan back into the fire. Heidnik's father was cruel and abusive. He would humiliate Heidnik for wetting the bed by making him hang the soiled sheets outside for neighbors to see. He and his brother were also forced to wear pants with fabric balls sewn on them, so other kids would kick them. His father was also deeply racist, teaching his sons that black people were inferior. Because of this abuse, plus a childhood head injury that left him with a misshapen skull, Heidnik became a sad and isolated child. He pushed others away, once yelling at a classmate that she was not worthy to speak to him. Despite his high IQ of 148, Heidnik was aimless. He bounced from one path to another, starting with military school at 14, which he left. After dropping out of regular school at 17, he joined the U.S. Army. By then, his life was driven by 2 obsessions: becoming an army officer and getting rich. He was a great recruit. After basic training, he became an army medic in Texas. On the side, he made money by giving high-interest loans to other soldiers. He was then sent to a hospital in West Germany. But at age 19, things started to go wrong. He went to sick bay complaining of dizziness, blurred vision, and nausea. Heidnik began showing signs of severe mental illness, possibly schizophrenia, and was prescribed antipsychotics. Some thought he might be faking to get out of the army. Mental illness ran in his family. His brother was in institutions and attempted suicide, and his mother died by suicide in 1970. Heidnik was hospitalized over 20 times for suicide attempts. In late 1962, the Army diagnosed him with schizoid personality disorder, a condition marked by emotional detachment, a preference for being alone, and difficulty connecting with others. This led to his honorable discharge after just 13 months of service, with a disability pension. After the Army, Heidnik's life remained unstable. He became a nurse but was soon fired for rude and aggressive behavior, showing no care for his patients. Despite his high intelligence, he couldn't stick with anything. He seemed entitled, expecting instant high-status jobs, like becoming a general or a top professional, without putting in the work. Whenever he faced effort or delay, he quit. A clear pattern emerged. He was drawn to roles that gave him power over others, whether in the military, police work, or nursing. In 1971, Heidnik founded his own church. It started small but grew to 50 devoted followers who saw him as their bishop. The church had two main purposes for him. 1. Wealth. He used its account to make smart investments, turning $1,500 into over $500,000 in a decade, all tax-free. 2. Power. It gave him a loyal audience that obeyed him, finally providing the control he had always sought. Even after his arrest in 1987, his followers remained loyal, asking police when Bishop Heidnik would return to lead them. Gary Heidnik first broke the law seriously in 1976, shooting at a tenant and grazing the man's face. In the 1970s, he started dating African American women, saying they treated him better. But he deliberately chose women with severe learning disabilities. This shows his racism, narcissism, and his need to control vulnerable people. Based on his background, Heidnik viewed black women with disabilities as inferior and non-threatening. This allowed him to create a relationship of total control where he could freely abuse them. He demonstrated this in 1978 by checking Alberta, a 34-year-old woman with the mental capacity of a young child, out of her institution. He then took her to his home and imprisoned her in his basement. Heidnik kidnapped, imprisoned, and repeatedly raped Alberta. When she was reported missing, police searched his home but initially found nothing due to her concealment in a basement storm cellar. Upon her discovery, a medical exam confirmed the sexual assault and infection. However, at his 1978 trial, Alberta was deemed unable to testify due to her disabilities, forcing the dismissal of the most serious charges like rape and kidnapping. Heidnik, who showed no remorse, was convicted only on lesser charges like unlawful restraint. He received a sentence of 3 to 7 years, serving just 4 before his release in 1983. A psychiatrist warned he was highly likely to re-offend. Shortly after his release, Heidnik used a mail-order bride service, marrying Betty Disto from the Philippines in October 1985. He likely expected a subservient victim, but Betty resisted his control and condemned his abusive behavior, which included forcing her to watch him with other women. During their brief marriage, she suffered repeated rape and beatings. With the aid of Philadelphia's Filipino community, Betty escaped in January 1986. Following Betty's escape, Heidnik was charged with assault and rape, but the case was dropped when she failed to appear in court. This event likely solidified his decision to return to targeting a more vulnerable demographic, as he had with Alberta. Realizing he needed total control to maintain a harem, he resolved to confine susceptible women in his basement. By November 1986, he began acting on this horrific plan to create his on-demand sex slaves. Between November 1986 and March 1987, Gary Heidnik kidnapped 6 women and imprisoned them in a basement dungeon in his Philadelphia home. His plan was to create a harem of sex slaves to bear his children. His first victim was Josefina Rivera, a 25-year-old sex worker. On November 25, 1986, Heidnik lured her to his home, then choked and handcuffed her. He forced her into a freshly dug pit in his basement, revealing his intent to imprison 10 women for this purpose. After leaving her alone for 27 hours, he returned with another captive, beginning the nightmare for his 5 subsequent victims. Sandra Lindsay, the second victim, was a 25-year-old woman from a care facility whom Heidnik had previously assaulted. He forced her to write a letter claiming she had left voluntarily. Although her suspicious mother gave police Heidnik's address, They dismissed it, assuming she was a runaway. Imprisoned together, Josefina and Sandra were raped and beaten daily. Kept naked in the cold basement, they quickly grew ill from starvation, dehydration, and hypothermia. On December 22, 1986, Heidnik abducted his third victim, 19-year-old Lisa Thomas. He approached her on the street, offered her a ride to apologize for an offensive remark, then took her to dinner and his home. There he drugged her wine. After she fell unconscious, he raped her, handcuffed her, and threw her into the basement pit with the other women. On January 2, 1987, Heidnik abducted 23-year-old Deborah Davend. She was potentially homeless at the time. Deborah fought every step of the way, and Heidnik had trouble subduing her. He placed her in the hole. She was viciously beaten and eventually took her place with the other captives. On January 18, 1987, Gary Heidnik picked up 18-year-old sex worker Jacqueline Askins. After their encounter, he strangled her, handcuffed her, and forced her into a basement pit. With Jacqueline's capture, Heidnik held 5 women captive underground. The first victim, Josefina Rivera, had already endured 52 days of this horror. Gary Heidnik subjected the women to relentless rape and beatings. To control them, he appointed one as a temporary leader while he was out. Upon returning, he demanded the leader name someone who had misbehaved. If no one was named, they were all beaten. To further terrorize them, he forced sharp objects into their ears in an attempt to deafen them. This served a dual purpose. They couldn't hear him coming or know when he had left, preventing escape attempts. He fed them erratically, sometimes giving nothing or only dog food. In a stark contrast, he once provided Chinese food and champagne to celebrate a captive's birthday. The women were left severely malnourished, dehydrated, hypothermic, and covered in bruises. Several became critically ill, most notably Sandra Lindsay. In February 1987, Sandra Lindsay enraged Heidnik by trying to escape. As punishment, he handcuffed her by one wrist to a ceiling beam, leaving her hanging for days. Believing she was pregnant, he force-fed her, but her weakened body could not survive. She eventually died, slumping to the floor when released. Upon seeing Sandra dead, fellow captive Josefina Rivera recalled, "I was broken-hearted. Me and Sandra were close. We spent so many hours together in the hole." In a final act of cold brutality, Heidnik forced the remaining captives to help dismember Sandra's body. He used a power saw to remove her limbs, which he stored in the freezer labeled as dog food. He cooked her ribs in the oven and boiled her head on the stove. To terrorize the others, he showed Deborah Davend Sandra's head and warned her that defiance would lead to the same fate. While rumors persist that her remains were ground up and fed to the other women, this claim lacks concrete evidence. The putrid smell from cooking Sandra's body parts led to neighbors calling the police, and when they attended, Heidnik simply said that he'd burnt a roast, and they left. While raping and torturing these women, Heidnik would occasionally leave the basement, go upstairs in his property, and hold sermons for his church congregation before returning to continue his vile abuse. Heidnik would also use electricity to torture the women, applying a live wire to their chains and giving them electric shocks. March 19, 1987, Heidnik put 3 of the women, including Deborah Davend, into the pit filled with water while they were wearing chains. He then applied mains current to their bindings, and as a result of this, Deborah died. In a desperate bid to survive, Josefina Rivera pretended to comply fully with Heidnik, earning his trust and more freedom. She assisted in disposing of a victim's body and even agreed to help him abduct a new woman. On March 23, 1987, Heidnik and Josefina targeted 24-year-old Agnes Adams, whom they both knew. After assaulting her, Heidnik locked Agnes in the basement, solidifying his trust in Josefina. The next day, March 24th, Josefina asked to visit her family, promising to return with another woman. Heidnik agreed, dropping her at a gas station to wait. Once out of sight, Josefina Rivera called the police. Officers saw the marks of restraints on her leg and believed her story. They immediately arrested Gary Heidnik at the gas station and then went to his house. Upon opening the basement, they found and freed the 3 surviving women, Lisa, Agnes, and a 4th, who were still imprisoned in the pit. The police were able to recover the body of Deborah Dauvend and some of the body parts of Sandra Lindsay, including removing her arms and legs from the freezer. They also found pieces of her thigh, skin, and muscle, all neatly wrapped. Over 27 pounds of dismembered human remains were recovered in total. Despite his high IQ, Gary Heidnik's courtroom defense was chaotic and shifting. Upon his arraignment on April 23, 1987, he pled not guilty to all charges. His initial claim was that the women were already in the basement when he moved into the house, an assertion easily disproven. His story later changed to suggest he was aware of the captives but that they had killed each other. He also made unsubstantiated claims of cannibalism, which forensic analysis of his kitchen tools did not support. These contradictory statements appeared to be part of a failed attempt to build an insanity defense. Despite his defense's focus on mental illness, the jury found Gary Heidnik fully responsible for his crimes. The survivor's testimony revealed his calculated, methodical actions, and prosecutors highlighted his proven competence in managing large investments and running a church for over a decade. On July 1, 1988, the jury convicted him on all major counts, including 2 murders, 5 kidnappings, and multiple rapes and assaults. He was sentenced to death. Gary Heidnik spent over a decade on death row, never admitting guilt or showing remorse. In 1999, a failed suicide attempt preceded his execution. On July 6, 1999, after a final meal of pizza and coffee, he was executed by lethal injection. He made no final statement. Upon his death at 10:29 p.m., a witness was heard to shout, "Thank God." Crimes of this man are particularly heinous, but why did he do it? I think that due to his traumatic childhood, Heidnik developed a general hatred of society, but in particular women, likely due to the lack of care from his mother. Also, due to the racist views of his father, I believe that Heidnik considered those from any ethnic background, but particularly African Americans, as an even lesser form of life. Likely due to his intellect, Heidnik appears to have felt that he was special and worthy of great things, that others were not worthy of him given his gifts. I think that he assumed that people should just hand him power. So what are your thoughts on this case? Had you heard about the crimes of Gary Heidnik before? Is it just me, or do you think that while he might have been the inspiration for Buffalo Bill, his crimes are so much worse? Anyway, if you like the content, please like, share, and subscribe. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.